Hello, grade 8. So today we're going to talk about three important politicians before Confederation. Actually, they were involved in Confederation, but we're going to give you a bit of background on three important individuals. The first two, and I'm actually on a site called Canadian History Bits, wordpress.com. It's like a blog. I'll share this link with you on Google Classroom at some point. So the first two people you can see are Johnny Macdonald and Georges Etienne Cartier. And they have an interesting background. They were actually enemies at the beginning, and I'll talk a bit about that in a minute. But they eventually became good friends, and they were instrumental in helping form Canada as a country. So a bit of background about Johnny Macdonald. He was born in Scotland. He moved to Kingston, Upper Canada. That's what Ontario was called at the time. When he was 5, he ran his own law practice. And during the Upper Canada Rebellion of 1837, which you may remember from grade 7, Macdonald actually fought on the side of the British Loyalists. Okay. So that's interesting. Macdonald was a good politician. People often said that he drank too much. But he was able to get things done and knew the system quite well. Georges Etienne Carche is a picture of him here. He was born in Lower Canada. He was a lawyer at first, but then became involved in politics quite early. He actually worked for Louis-Joseph Papineau and Robert Nelson, and they were on the Patriot side of the Lower Canada Rebellion. So that was the opposite side of the British Loyalists. So it's interesting. Anyways, Cartier and Macdonald met in 1855, and they were in the province of Canada legislature. One was east, one was west. And so that was important. And they worked together quite well. There's an interesting picture of the two. And Cartier actually got a lot of things done in the government, particularly for Canada East. And because of the way the government was set up, he was able to get things passed, and you can see a few things here. Independence of Parliament Act, amendments to the Municipal Corporations Act, registration of voters, and so on. And they even helped create civil code in Lower Canada. Now, there's somebody else, which we'll talk about in a minute, George Brown, and he had an interesting relationship with Johnny Macdonald, and I'm going to talk about that right now. So it's an interesting little picture here. It's almost like a boxing duel. Well, these two individuals, George Brown and Johnny Macdonald, did not get along for quite some time. George Brown, he was also bought in Scotland, and he came over here eventually, and started a newspaper called The Globe, which you may have heard of. There was another paper called The Mail. Now it's called The Globe and Mail. But anyways, this is one of the early issues of The Globe. So Brown was a top businessman in Toronto and political powerhouse, although he wasn't an elected representative right off the bat. One thing that got him on the wrong foot with Johnny Macdonald was when after an election in 1848, he was asked to investigate abuses that had gone on in the provincial penitentiary in Kingston, Ontario, and found some evidence that some abuses had been going on, and got the warden fired, and that was bad for Johnny Macdonald because that was one of his friends. Anyways, so a feud started, and came to a head when George Brown, he was actually in the he was now in the House. In the Parliament, he got into a heated debate with Macdonald, and Macdonald mentioned about his friend who had gotten fired, and anyway, so that argument stopped, and eventually Brown was exonerated from the claims that Mcdonald had made against him. But anyways, they didn't get off on the right foot. They seemed to fight a lot of things, particularly with how Johnny Macdonald got along with the French Canadians and Georges Etienne Cartier. There was a bill in 1855 on separate schools, and this is actually the base of why we have separate schools in Ontario. George Brown really didn't like that. He also did not like he didn't like the way that the government was being run. He was for representation by population, and wrote about it in his paper, The Globe, for years actually, to try and make sure that was the way the government would run. And he wanted a federal union, he wanted provincial governments rep by pop, and it took him a few years to make his dream become a reality. Anyways, so I'm just setting a bit of a backdrop for what's coming up in Canadian history classes right now. And again, as I was saying, I'll post both of these blogs onto the grade 8 classroom. I hope this makes a bit of sense, and good to give you this information, and we will chat soon. Bye for now.